Hey guys, Cribben Govender from the Gut Health Gurus podcast. I've got a background in food science. Today, I have one of my friends, my fermentation friends, Sharon Flynn. By popular demand, I do post quite regularly on our Facebook group, the Gut Health Gurus, on who people want us to get a hold of. And people have just been screaming at me to get the one and only Sharon Flynn, author of a book called Ferment for Good, onto the podcast. She's an Aussie and she's making big waves in the fermentation world in Melbourne and in Australia. Sharon, welcome to the show.
Hey, Kevin, thanks for having me.
No,
I'm so flattered that people asked for me to come on.
you're a superstar, Sharon. You don't realize you're inspiring so many people and doing so many great things. And what we like to do at the start of every podcast is to get it from the horse's mouth. Who is Sharon Flynn?
Who am I? Oh my gosh, I am, well, firstly I'd say just a army brat, grew up moving around a lot. That really has defined my character quite a bit, because when you move, there's a certain openness, you have to make friends easily. And then I just kept moving. And then secondly, I'm a mum and a stepmom of 5 kids.
Wow.
And I do add that to who I am, definitely, of course, but because it, all the different personalities in our house add so much to our decisions every day, and how we run the business and how we're able to run the business, and my own personal growth,
Mm-hmm.
And then, well, do I stop there? Because, I'm separated and repartnered. It's a big deal too. Gone through a lot of growth over the last 5 years thinking about that. And then lastly, I have this amazing growing business that's really taken over my mind and heart for the last 6 years. Yeah. If I didn't have all those children and partners, it wouldn't be as good, but I'd love to be able to spend 24/7 on this little business. I'm in love with it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And
I'm a 6-foot person who spent her whole 20s in Japan, which is kind of crazy. I should have been in Amsterdam or somewhere where the other tall people are.
I'd imagine you'd stick out.
Me a lot. Yeah, my 20s.
You'd be sticking out like a sore thumb in Japan.
One of those things when you can't see yourself from the outside, so you're just bumbling along in life, and it's pretty similar to how I am. I'm in a workspace with a lot of younger people, and I feel like I'm their age, until one of them will say, "Oh, you're just like my mum," or something, and I'm like, "Oh, I could be your mum." I feel younger than I look, I guess. And I felt smaller or shorter than I am in Japan. And it was only when I was leaving, finally, it was like, after being there for a long time, I hired a friend to come in and replace me in my job. And she couldn't find me. And I was working at a girls' university high school. And she was walking all around, and she would ask the different security guards, "Where's Furin sensei?" And they would be like, huh? And they're like, "Oh, Jumbo. I didn't know. By the time I was just leaving, and she's like, everyone here, everyone calls you Jumbo. After the first 2 people, I just said, "Do you know where Jumbo is?" And I was pregnant at the time too, so I was just like, oh, how offensive. Yeah.
That's an amazing story. And if I could just side note, the first time I ever came across the Fermentary, and that's Sharon's beautiful business, the Fermentary, my wife and I often go up to Dalesford to collect spring water. And so we stopped off at this local health food shop and we bought some water kefir because we were starting to get interested in water kefir at that time. So we stopped off, we said, "Oh, wow, they're selling water kefir." And we opened it. And when we opened it, it kind of it was really fizzy and it was like spraying all over the place. And it's like, "Oh, this is proper water kefir." And we tried it. And it was the most amazing water kefir I've ever tasted. And I just fell in love with the product, and we've been huge fans ever since. And then I was pretty much working in industry for a company called SA Brands, and this was years and years ago, and they were interested in
I always
SA,
call it sub-brands.
SAR brands or SA brands, and whatever you want to call it. I think either way is acceptable. And then the SA brands people were interested in Water Kefir, and straight away I was like, yep, I got to reach out to Sharon. And Sharon was the most amazing, warm, welcoming person. She welcomed me into her space and showed me what she does, and incredibly kind and generous soul. So I'm very blessed to have Sharon as a friend. So that's a side note. So Sharon, how did you begin this love affair with fermented foods?
Really, when I was in love with it, I wouldn't have called it fermented food. It was just at the beginning, probably when I was 16, 17, I started my interest in fermented foods and wild and fizzy, interesting flavors. So each time I was an exchange student in Denmark, and they lived in a big old, beautiful old pig farm. And it was an old house. So they had a fridge. Instead of a large fridge, they had a large walk-in cold room. And they'd put all the meat and the soups and all the leftovers like we would have done in our fridge at home in that cold room. Not a cool room, literally a room that was just sort of stone and cold. And things would go a little bit fizzy, or they would sour, and then she would say that was on purpose, and they liked it like that. They would make a beautiful sweet pie, like an apple thing, and then put the soured cream on it. And I'd be thinking, see, you know what? That's sour. That's something's awry. And slowly I learned that's what they were aiming for, and it wasn't dangerous. And, we didn't need Glad wrap. And they had local honey and beautiful local milk, and it was just part of their life. I'd never been exposed to that. My mum bought Flora margarine and tip-top white bread, and just like a 70s mum. And, it was a miracle to her that those things are so convenient now. So I grew up with that, and then going there and having just hard butter and fresh food was pretty mind-blowing. And we moved around a lot. I lived in Malaysia and Denmark in my teens and was exposed to a lot of flavours. But it was when I moved to Japan probably that I started fermenting. And I still would never have called it fermenting. I would have said things like, oh my God, I'm learning so much. As a single Australian woman, 6 foot, living in a very small country town an hour outside of Tokyo. They never had anyone living there like that before. And there are a lot of Australians there now, but back in 93, there weren't. People showed me what they were doing, and I had this thing called dinner service, dinner service, and that's like Hello Fresh now, but this was 30 years ago. That's how I learnt to cook, because I was too busy, and I'd get my little box and it would have the recipes, and I would make the food, and the neighbours down the road and the ladies in the garden down the hill, they showed me, almost Suzuki method style, by grabbing my hand and doing, miso and natto and nuka. And it was all fascinating. And I was really lucky because, you might not think it's lucky. Like I sort of sound lonely. Like I didn't have any friends in that town. I was too different. And all the old people, they liked me, and then eventually a couple of years in, I got some friends. And by the time I got those friends, they would come to my house and be like, the house looks like a grandma's house, because I've been donated all this weird furniture and stuff. But that would have been my first real experience digging my hands in things and making these beautiful ferments. But they would have been, for me, literally writing home to my mum was miso. I wouldn't have said I'm fermenting, And then I moved to Chicago, where we lived near, in a Jewish neighbourhood. And I say that it was literally, the public school had different holiday programs and things to us. We learned a lot there, and there was a lot of pickles in the supermarkets, and the little stores, they would give your kid a pickle in the trolley, and I just thought that was from the barrel, and it was so lovely. And I got interested in that, but they didn't have, in my neighbourhood, I couldn't get good bread, and I'd been in Japan for so long, and I needed good bread. So then I had 2 children, and I got into making my own bread. And there was just a moment where I was sprinkling the yeast on, and I was like, who makes the yeast actually? And so I went to the baker and I said, how do you get your yeast? He goes, oh, this, this block. So I was like, cool. And he goes, here, you can just have some. So then I felt the next level. I was like, I'm the person who's got like straight from the baker. And then there was a point where I went as well, where the hell did he get this block of yeast from? What is it? And that was all that was happening there. And I started making cheese, buying cultures and watching it on a VHS, how to make cheese. So I was going through this thing. We moved to Seattle from Chicago. And that's where I joined a CSA, which is a community supported agriculture. You're probably familiar with it? No. It's where a farmer will decide how many families they can feed over a year with their size land.
Oh, wow.
And you join by paying in advance. So you might pay $800 or $1,200. It always feels like quite a lot. And it should do, because then you're committed. This is where I'm getting my vegetables from for the year. If anything goes wrong for that farmer, like there's floods, their people will come from the city and help out or give more money. When they have abundance, you get it too. So it's just this wonderful thing. So ideally a family would say, I can feed 20 families, for example, and you give them the money in advance. They have that, they can live off that for the year, and they can plan their planting season for their people. It's really lovely. I happen to be involved with quite a big one, because Seattle's like that, called Jubilee Farms. Look them up if you're interested in this. And they, literally at the beginning you do go, I paid $1,200 and it's just lettuce, or it's just early spring stuff. And this is a ripoff, When you're new at that, you do feel kind of annoyed, and you start getting veggies that you're like, I never use this, and now I've got all these leeks, or, I've got too many Jerusalem artichokes or something. But you've committed your money to it, so you're like, I'm going to keep going. And by end of summer, you just get so much, that it's like, take as many watermelons as you want, or as many pumpkins. And then they had pickling days and fermenting days where you could learn to keep the harvest. And that's the real meaning then. Then you're like, okay, in abundance, you need to hold on to it, because next spring, it's just lettuce again for a little while. So like if you want to do this for 2 years, you need to get involved in the preserving part. And Sandor Katz was in town, and I heard about that, and I went, not as a guru, just as part of this sort of naturopaths thing that they were doing. So I went and saw that and got his first book. It was a little magazine, and then he had this wild fermenting book, and I read about sourdough. And that's sort of the answer I'd been looking for in Chicago, like, how the hell do you make bread without this packet? And that was like almost a spiritual awakening, because I felt that with all my moves everywhere, and I was lucky enough to be a full-time carer of my kids and look after the house and spend time on the food. I felt like I was knowledgeable foodie, but when I read about sourdough, I was like, I literally don't know anything. And wow, what an awakening, because what you don't see, there's so much that we don't see that's so powerful, and that just, I still get goosebumps when I think about that, because I was like, okay, let's try it, and water and flour and some thyme. Made my bread fluffy. I was like, what? And why don't we all know this? And what's happened? And that was it for me. Then I went, oh, I'm going to, but then we moved actually. I got through this, went through the bread making, the cheese making phase, even made my daughter, because we were in America and they do science projects, And so I made them do their science projects we put a grape in the sourdough, the bread, flour, the water and flour and a grape, water and flour and something else, and a skittle. You always have these assumptions. Yeah. But I was trying to prove it to my kids, like, this is terrible, but the skittle actually gave us the best result. Easy sugars, of course, yeast loves sugar.
Yeah.
And so I learned a lot in that science experiment too, and don't be too cocky with your with your assumptions. That was pretty funny. So I did get right into that. And then we moved to Belgium, and I didn't have the room to keep experimenting like I was. Plus I was so busy relocating everybody and enjoying everything that was there, the beer and the bread, everything was good there. I didn't really need to make anything. But towards the end, we're there for 3 years. The last year, my youngest daughter got really sick. No one really knew what it was. One of those things that you can only really map out retrospectively, you know, because when it's happening, you sort of just go, oh, gee, that hasn't fixed yet. Let's go to the doctor. And it sort of just started snowballing, and they couldn't pinpoint it. And a few other kids had it in her school, but they were older. And it was this really random thing where she would get a fever every 12 hours, like 2 p.m. and 2 a.m. Really high, but every time you didn't know how long it would go for, really. Like, you never got to that relaxed point where you're like, yeah, just relax, it's going to be finished in 40 minutes, because it was 40 degrees sometimes. You're going to be like, Jesus. And sometimes I would take her to the hospital, and she had so many scans, and in the end they said, it's pretty strong antibiotic, but what else are we going to do? So it'll knock her around a bit. And, you know, when people say that, when a doctor says it's going to knock you around, you think of, like, I don't know, what do you imagine it's going to do, knock you around? I don't know, feel a bit tired, achy or something. You don't think it's going to wipe your entire system out of any bacteria and you'll suffer for the next years. You know, I didn't think that. So she took it, and from that moment she couldn't really digest food, so she would eat something and vomit.
Oh, God.
And then not eating, she lost weight. She was only 4, and she was a tall kid, so she was quite skinny and lanky, you know, and she looked pretty skeletal pretty quickly. She had all kinds of other things, you know, bronchitis, and she'd get things. And it was just, in the end, we were going to the doctor and they were saying things like, maybe she has childhood depression, or maybe mum does, you know, like, maybe you seem very vulnerable, because I would tear up in the doctor's office trying to tell them the history of what's been going on with her and why can't someone sort of get to the bottom of it. So it was going into the realm of autism spectrum, eating disorder, childhood depression. And of course, I knew that wasn't the case. Is that too bright?
That is pretty bright, but that's better.
Yeah, I'm just me. So I just had to hunt it down, and I wanted to move home. By then, we'd been on the road literally for 20 years. Marriage was not great, so I wanted to come home. You know, sickness can do that, you know, can bring out the reality of things. Came home, but before I did, a lot of people started talking to me about, oh, you know, what's going on. And one lady mentioned that her naturopath had said, stop chasing the virus, and perhaps just try and put bacteria back into her gut, and from what the antibiotics might have done. And then she gave me a list of food, and all of the things on that list had been a hobby. So I was just like, I can do this. If you've ever had someone, I know you have, I mean, if you've had someone in your life that needs your help and you haven't been given many things to do to deal with it other than medicating, and then someone gives you some kind of empowerment, it's just wonderful, because you can go, right, at least I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do it really well, and, you know, let's go, let's deal with it. So when I got back, I got this book, the GAPS book, and that was ages ago. Like, no one had heard of that. We're talking, 2012. I got that book. I was a single mum then, and I couldn't do all of that bone broth, cutting everything out, really strict thing. I would have, but at the beginning was just settling into a new school. I put it down a year. We're in a very small school, and started just adding these things. So the first one was the water kefir. No, it probably wasn't, but there were a few things: natto, yogurt, miso, just store-bought.
Yep.
And, you know, I just started being really aware, and then I'd cut out the carbs, because by then she was well and truly one of those people, you know, where you can go, oh, you're addicted to carbs. You're getting like a glazed look while you eat this pasta, which was in the GAPS book, you know, all these things about the poop and everything. I was like, yes, yeah, you know. It's hard not to start diagnosing all the friends and people that you know along the way when you're reading things like that, isn't it? You're like, just don't try and be too evangelical. Within 3 weeks, literally, she would wake up and start going, can I have my drink? And I was like, yeah, have as much of that, drink as you want. And things just started changing. She just started eating, and, you know, and I just kept putting different things, different krauts, different meats, and kraut and potato and kraut. And she just started eating it and getting better. So a lot of people who were going to that little school noticed the change, or they were my new friends and they came over, and I talked about it quite evangelically. And I did have different language back then. We're talking about everything I'd read in the GAPS book, die off, die back. We were all waiting for that to happen and talking about that. And then that was a great stage, and I was trying to show people how to do it themselves, because I was just doing that. Then word of mouth got around, and I'd be like, well, I've got so much here, just take it. I had a few people early on say this could be a business and be business partners and things like that, but it was usually very casual arrangement where I was still doing all of the making, so didn't really. I was the one with the passion and the, I needed to keep doing this. But what happened early on, I think, was I attracted a lot of pretty sick people. Those people would say, I went to my naturopath, they don't know anything about it. Because this is 2012, 13. Then a show on Catalyst happened, and everyone saw that, a lot of people saw that and said, oh, I saw that, maybe you are right, So that was a slow burn. So until that came out and research started mounting to the evidence was there and the science was helping us out, I ended up trying to teach people how to do it themselves. And at the end of my lectures, no matter what I'd said, people would always go, how much should I take? They just want to know that. And I really was always left with, what's going on in Australia? Because I'd been overseas a lot and the food had been quite different. I've been telling these stories to my kids that were not true. Like, kids in Australia don't swear. Kids in Australia eat really good lunches. Nobody has small packets of chips or anything. I think this idea from the 70s when I was a kid at school. And none of that was real. But also the food system was pretty crappy. There were no fermented foods you could buy other than yogurt with sweeteners, and there was nothing. So then I realized, this is pretty sick, really. And people are asking me how much I should take when I'm talking about food. What? This is delicious food to add to your diet. That's been missing in our Australian diet for a very long time. All there is to it. Make it or buy it, but they couldn't buy it. So that's when I started saying, all right, I'll sell it to you. So I had 3 fridges in my garage. People could come and just put money in. I would take an esky in my car. I started teaching at the girls' school, and I'd have an esky there, and people could take it from the boot of the car and put money in the jar.
Wow.
I know. I felt like the lady from Weeds, but not drugs. I did feel empty though, I say. It just got to the point where I felt like, the people I got home one day and there were 2 guys in the driveway, and they were like, are you the sauerkraut lady? Oh, yes. And I was like, I need to not have people driving up to, we were in the country, so it's a long driveway. So I asked the local health food store, can you put this in? I'm not going to cause any trouble, but I'll put like Cribben, or, Cribben, here's the orange one you wanted, or little messages. And then he gave me food. So we didn't even give invoices or anything. It was just like, he'd say, it's about $800, Like, whoa, that's a lot. Yeah. And then if you're starting a business, I think, and you're in a smallish town, that's a great way. I can't say I didn't think of it being great marketing, but I didn't really plan it. But people want to have their name on a tag in a fridge. They were like, what's that? What's going on there? Why has Cribben got his name? I want it. And they're like, no, that's Cribben's. So people wanted it more and more. And while I was still using funnels, and we still use funnels, but while I was still in my home kitchen, making every night while the kids were asleep, people from restaurants started going to that store and then calling me and saying, can I have this in my restaurant? And I was saying, no, I'm not, this is not my intention. So I think it took me about 6 months to say I better quit my job, and because I'll make more I was making $20 an hour at the school I was working at. It's not very much. I was like, if I sell a bottle for $15, that's an hour's work at the school. So I did. I took a big brave step and did, but gosh, I didn't know what I was getting into. When you told me when we met, you were like, I would never do that. But I was like, I think it's too late. Because I think we might have met really right then and there when I'd just quit my job, right?
I
It
think
might
so.
have been very early, yeah.
You were down at that, was it Port Melbourne or something like that?
Yes, South Melbourne.
South
We went
Melbourne.
coffee.
Yes,
Maybe it was, yeah.
and we did, and that was the first time I met your other friend, Cinzia, who's gone on to do great things as well.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. The smoothie bombs.
And they're in the States, I think they're in Walmart.
Wow, she's done so well. I'm so pleased for her. It's amazing.
It's also been, it's hard work, food business,
So
as
much,
you know.
so
A
hard.
person like you knows that. People like me who are just like innocent. People ask us, "Oh, how do you do this? How do you build a business?" I'm like, optimism, naivety. You have to be naive.
And then passion. I think with the passion just shines out in what you do, because you take so much pride, and you're so meticulous and so rigid in the way you do things, which is great because you have your standards. It shines in the product. And then I'm not surprised that high-end restaurants would want to reach out to you and get a hold of that, because it's so difficult to do what you do, because the food industry will shortcut things. They'll use additives, and they'll use different cultures and whatnot to make the product faster, cheaper, more efficiently, commercially. But the way you do things is small batch, by hand, incredibly labor intensive, time intensive, cost intensive, but the end product is out of this world. So I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. Thanks for knowing that about us. We do. It's not a very profitable way to run a food business. That's for sure. It's our 5th or 6th year, and we're just starting to see where it's going to, the sweet spot. We are. There's a point where I was like, do I keep at farmers market? You can't be in the middle, because that's where you have to buy some machinery, you have to buy a lot of quantities of jars or something, you can't afford it. It's pretty tough. But I think because I started where I did, where it was for people that I was talking to and friends with gut issues, there's never been any other way to make the product, because I want to be proud. I want to give it to you and be like, here, taste this. This is the real thing, and it's a rare thing. And along the way, because I wasn't in food manufacturing, every ingredient I had to buy, I learnt more about, and how heartbreaking that is to know, we can now, but we couldn't get organic raw sugar in Australia, where we knew what is Queensland in your mind, where you get sugar, it's where you get sugar from, and we had to get it from Sri Lanka or South America.
That's it.
It's cheaper to get strawberries frozen from Chile than to get a farmer to deliver them to you even. There's some really seriously wrong things, and it's time consuming to find solutions for it. But it always just comes back to, we started this for our family. I don't want to give my mum is so proud, and she'll go to little health food stores when I first get into it, and she'll buy something. But I would hate it for me to go, don't drink it though. Get the real one from me. It has to be what I want my mum to have is what I want for your mum to have. So that's how we've built it. And we're still hand jarring and bottling.
That's amazing. So it's a real deal. It's definitely real. I highly encourage people to go out and find the Fermented products, because they're amazing. Now, Sharon, let's segue to, I guess, some of the issues that, firstly, you've highlighted some of the challenges, but what about, let's explore some of the other products that are entering the market and comparing that to people that actually do it properly. Because I do get a bit annoyed that some out there are riding a trend and putting products in the market, because fermented foods are not regulated. And both of us sat in at that session with the Department of Health. So we know intimately the challenges and what's going on in the industry. So some people are actually riding a trend, putting products in the market that are very new. It's very cowboy days. So there's no regulation around what you can call a product. for instance, kefir or kombucha are prime examples. I think the fermented vegetables are pretty good on the market. So that doesn't really concern me about what's coming out. But what does concern me, for instance, if you go into any major supermarket shelf, you'll see the explosion of kefir. Kombucha, firstly, is huge now. It's mainstream. And then secondly, kefir, which is emerging. So let's talk. What's your thoughts on those products? How do they compare to a product that you make, for instance, with proper kefir grains?
The easiest way that I describe the end result is that you're getting a wide diversity. I'd say, what the food standards want is predictability and consistency. They want to know exactly what's in there. So when you don't know what's in there, part of the magic, is this is nature's intellect. This is don't play with that. We don't know everything, and that's one thing that's very frustrating to me in the science realm of food. You're like, don't manipulate it. We have a symbiosis with these things, and we don't know best necessarily. We don't always know everything, and we're discovering that. And one thing is all that mainstream media coming out, or the research around gut and brain health. Oh my gosh. When you sort of sit back, you're like, we've had that knowledge for a very long time. We just haven't had the exact details. One thing for sure is, so there's the diversity in the bacteria. A lot of the places, the labs that would get our water kefir measured at don't even have the technology to read what bacteria they are. They don't know them. We'd have to send it, I think, to Wisconsin, or someone's told me that there is a place that can do it. But so that's something. The next thing is that our products are naturally carbonated. And, I've spoken to a lot of food science people, and they're like, so what? Carbonation is carbonation. That's not true. No. Because the reason people have to force carbonate, predictability and consistency and everything, but also there's no carbonation without alcohol, right? So they've been forced to make a crappy product because of our fear of alcohol. And, at times I've thought, how do I tell that story? Like functional alcohol, or, like this is very low, don't worry about it. So we did decide to become licensed so we can keep the product real. It was, as I said before, it's that or nothing. I didn't want to be making another product that I didn't want to make for my own kids. So the natural fizziness in a drink and having a little bit of alcohol carries the flavour further in your mouth. It feels better. Not only that, but I don't know how much like with herbs and nutrition, you probably do know a lot. When you put a spice or something in an acid and an alcohol, it's intensified and it does its job a lot better. That's how we've always given medicines and tinctures and preserves. So there's that aspect as well. So you're missing out on quite a lot of the health benefits when something is watered down. Initially, when we were like the only water kefir there was, and then there was another one, and that was lovely. It was also people who made them at home themselves and were selling them at farmers markets. That was great. When I started seeing the kombucha-like products, it bothered me at the beginning. I'd be like, hey, that's not real, or that's da-da-da. But it doesn't bother me as much anymore. I think every industry has its early days. Think of the wine industry or beer. It would started at this place where it was cleaning the water. Like beer was great for water, right? Purified water. Wine was just something humans have done, and then that's taken itself off into this mainstream thing where you've got cask wine and stuff that doesn't resemble what you'd make at home. So I feel like I can't be too judgmental on this, because this is a market that needs to sort itself out, and people need to learn. But the best thing I can do is make sure there is one to compare it to. So this is the beautiful real one for you. Yes, it's a bit more expensive. Yes, it might fizz. It might take you 1 minute to open my product. That's because it's real and good, Yes. And if you have to go to the BP when you're driving somewhere and you get petrol and you get yourself a drink, and there's all kinds of kombucha and kefirs and whatnot available, you know, at least you can come and find the real one when you want it. So that's sort of
totally.
how I've settled down and been like, you know what, there's a place and a time, and I've got a book out there that teaches you to do it if you want to. You can buy the grains from you or me. I do workshops. I offer the knowledge freely, and also the product for people who don't want to make it themselves. And we can keep doing what we're doing, Kevin, like, you know, teaching and talking, and hopefully the market will change a little bit. People will be starting to want better quality.
Yes. I think you hit the nail on the head there, Sharon. I'm totally with you. I think the missing piece of this puzzle is that the consumer could potentially be very confused and not have the right information to decipher what the real deal is versus a product that is more processed and doesn't contain the same benefits. And I think one way that industry could deal with it, and we had that discussion with the DHS, to actually put onto the label the percentage of the active. So for instance, if it's kombucha, because the way they get around the alcohol legislation is to heavily dilute the product. So for instance, getting companies to actually put down, you know, this product is 10% water kefir or 15% kombucha, and then that will give clarity to the consumer. Well, you know, Sharon's product is 100%. This is the Fermentary, versus another product that's mainstream, that's on the supermarket shelf, that might be 5%. So then that gives them, you know, I think it's needed from almost a trade practices, false and misleading legislation. So hopefully industry does wake up to this, and they put in place some new labeling laws around what you can actually call kombucha or kefir. Because the other thing is, kefir and kombucha, they can only really be made with the cultures, whether it's a kefir grains or a kombucha SCOBY. Now we're seeing products entering the market using yogurt cultures, for instance, to make kefir very cheaply.
Well, they call it kefir cultures, and you're like, well, you could call this anything because there's a lot of bacteria, it's bacteria, a lot of things.
Yes.
One of the things that I don't love is that probiotic water or probiotic orange juice. They're just adding probiotics to anything. It's like, get your probiotics while you can. Like fiber went through a stage like that without adding fiber, or, you know, calcium in milk, extra vitamin, what was it, D? So you can get there are things like that you can spend time being sort of like frustrated and angry, and then you're like, well, gosh, where does it begin? Why don't people know more about their food? And that it would hopefully come from up above, but they're also they're also people in our community, and they don't know either. So even though it's their job, I'm learning, because we have a lot of people come into the factory all the time to see if we're doing it properly. And they're generally very, very afraid of what we're doing. Like, bacteria? No. You know, our sauerkraut, I mean, yes, the labeling is fine, but you don't realize if you're going to make a lot of sauerkraut. Can you hear me all right with that? There's somebody grinding a log behind.
It's fine, perfectly fine.
Yeah, the initial reaction to our sauerkraut making was horror, almost got closed down.
Oh, wow.
You need to, as soon as they think of a vegetable that's shredded, something that's going to be shredded and then packed into bags and sold like coleslaw, or to another manufacturer to do something with it. So the rule of shredded cabbage is that you would shred it, and as soon as you have to make it a blank slate by not just washing it in water, but adding a citric acid or a bleach essentially to the cabbage. And I'd be like, no, because then there'll be no bacteria on it then. And then you can start with your recipe. So I'd be like, my recipe is just cabbage and salt. You know, if I salt a blank slate, nothing's going to happen. I need the cabbage to have bacteria on it. And I'd be like, why am I allowed to buy a raw cabbage in Coles and eat it however I want to? You know, like they can cut a cabbage up and wrap it in Glad wrap and sell it like that. Why isn't that dangerous? You know, they're not bleaching that. So it was all of a sudden it became like, how can I do as you say when I can see so many variances of this rule? And I'm growing bacteria on this. So that is the rule. Cut, bleach, sprinkle probiotic powder on there, and then you're right, you know. we didn't want to do it that way. So we've had to get a lot of testing and a HACCP plan.
Mm-hmm.
And HACCPs are fine. It's a lot of paperwork and you can pay someone to write your HACCP for you, but you have to have a factory designed so that everything flows properly. And that's been the expensive thing for us. It's taken us all this time really to get where we are. We've had our HACCP in theory checked off. They've got yet to come out and see the practice part. But it's been expensive for a small business to abide by
Sharon.
Do not see that this is the safest way to do it. You know, like don't pick on someone growing sprouts and putting them in a bag.
Totally. It's such a flawed system because you look at companies like Nourishment Organics or the Fermentary, and we've got HACCP plans, extremely expensive, heavily regulated, and then you've got eBay guys or Etsy guys or all these other companies that don't have to go through the scrutiny, and these guys are unregulated guys from home. But look, that's a story for another day. But it is extremely frustrating when you got
frustrating. Yep. I mean, but then like you're a leader in your field, and I guess we need to work out our responsibility now. It's very different to 5 years ago when we were going, hey, this is not fair. You know, what have you done? What are you doing? And now it's more, we want to make sure we're doing it right so that other people are trained in a way to do it as well.
Yes.
However, like you said, most industry is after cheaper, faster, and more. And I always tell everybody that's how we got here in the first place.
Yes.
We've got to bring it right back. And the first thing to have been cut out in industrialization were things that they couldn't make faster, which were fermented foods. So it's a prime example of a pickle, right? People are like, why? When I give them a lacto-fermented pickle, and they're like, I can't believe that that's sour with no vinegar, you know?
Yeah.
I'm like, well, because it's much easier. You could get any kind of cucumber and vinegar it, you know. We need to have thick-skinned ones. We need to take the flowering end off. We have to do all these things. So I understand it's better to do it with vinegar for a financial point of view. And then you heat it up. So you've got this vinegar is, in effect, imitating the sour flavour that you get naturally from lacto-fermentation. Nothing wrong with vinegar. But you're like, why wouldn't you try and get the sour flavour naturally, you know? And then you've got all this beautiful life. And you feel good, you know, straight away. And people often go, oh, that's pretty salty. That's not as what I'm used to. As soon as it hits their gut, they're like, can I have another one?
Yeah, and the gut bacteria will change, and then you got your gut bacteria telling you what you want. So it's an interesting model.
To do, give more pickles and milk kefir to the people making the decisions.
Yeah.
The food system.
That's right. We'll get them from the inside out. Sharon, we're pretty much coming up to time. We were such good flow. Let's segue now to something a little bit more actionable for people listening. Now, let's talk about people at home that want to start on a ferment. So are you able to suggest a nice, easy one to start, and how would they make it?
Okay, I always think brine vegetables are the easiest, because right now in anyone's home who might be listening, they probably have carrots in their fridge. Everyone has them in the bottom drawer, the fridge. So all you need to do is have a jar or some kind of a vessel, even if it's just an open vase, pottery thing. Go and clean those carrots. Cut them into either circles if you think you'd like to eat them like that, or planks if you want to dip them into hummus, or sticks. It's pretty easy. And you'll pop them into the jar, and then you'll get maybe a litre. It's easier to measure a litre of water and put a tablespoon of salt in that. And I'm not a person who boils the water to dissolve the salt. I'm too lazy. I just annoying, So just get normal water, but the best salt is sea salt, local sea salt. I'm not one to recommend chipping away at the Himalayas to get the salt from there. Australia's on an island, so we're surrounded by sea salt. So get your sea salt and make sure it's nice and fine, and that way it'll dissolve and you don't need to heat the water up. Anyway, you'll get that brine. So that's your brine. Pour it over your carrots. that could be it if you wanted it to be, and, you know, cover that and make sure they're underneath the brine. But flavouring a brine is a pretty fun thing and easy. A couple of black peppercorns, some mustard seeds, and these things also have antibacterial properties. So they, you know, mustard seeds are well known for that. It'll help keep the brine a little bit balanced if it needs to be. Fresh ginger will do that for you as well. I don't like ginger carrots personally, but coriander seeds, mustard seeds, maybe a bit of dill, something like that, coriander root, and then just leave it. And carrots are fast. If you put that in Monday, you'll have them by Thursday or Friday.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's the thing, you don't want to, then you'll need to refrigerate them. And that's why, going back to where we began with that house in Denmark, if only we all had this room, you know, that sits around 5 degrees all year, you just pop things in. That's what we used to have. Now with carrots, you really don't want them to keep fermenting because they lose their crispness quite easily. They get a bit slimy. They can get that calm yeast on the top. And if you're trying to learn and convert your friends, slimy, yeasty, soft carrots aren't the way. So 4 days, 4 to 5 days. Taste it. Pull one out, taste it. It should be nicely sour and brighter orange than when you started, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And they're great things to put into lunch boxes. Just like if you think about the Japanese bento, they will always put something sour and fermented to preserve the lunchbox during the day. I haven't got any proof. Maybe you can enlighten us, Cribben. But I feel like when I put something fermented like a carrot stick in a lunchbox, it's safer.
Yeah, absolutely.
The rest of the lunch is safe.
Totally. Who was it? I had someone on my podcast recently telling me about the history of sushi and how the actual the sushi was actually a fermented product to keep the product around. Because it was sour because the fermentation with the rice and then the protein sitting on top preserved it. So I wouldn't be surprised if you added this good bacteria into the lunchbox itself.
They put the plum in the rice now because it's preserved the rice.
That's it, because the lactobacilli will get in there and start producing all these antibiotic compounds that then increase the preservative life of the actual food product in a natural way, of course, which is amazing.
The way we've always done it, and we've made it this far.
Yeah,
right?
That's it. Totally.
So with all these allergies and all the problems that we're all going through, so add a little bit, and I would recommend going at it with a sense of joy and wonder, not to be like too preachy, but instead of fear, because a lot of people are like, oh, mine didn't work, you know. I'm like, no, how many times have you made a cake that was dry? Did you not eat cake anymore or give up? No, like give it a go. It's something you haven't seen growing up. You're always told everything should go in the fridge, you know, and now I'm saying to you, take the milk out, add a milk kefir SCOBY, let it sit on your bench for 2 days. I know it's foreign, but how else do you think we use milk before refrigeration, which is, by the way, not very old. Home refrigeration is so new.
Totally.
Just have a little think about the home refrigeration situation, how new that is and how we've survived this long. And yes, people might have become sick sometimes, but they're getting sick now, I think, more from lack of bacteria. So the carrot recipe is, you know, it's a pickle recipe really, but it's one that's pretty fail safe. And you can do that with beans. Green beans are fabulous. Broad beans, kidney beans, beautiful snacking foods to have brewing away on your kitchen bench, and pop them on the table when your friends are over and just nibble at these things and start adding them into your life without any fear or guilt or like I should be doing this or I'm taking this for my gut bacteria. Just remember that there was like a generation or two that got rid of these foods because they had margarine and white bread and they didn't know better. Now we do, and it's up to us to bring it back, because I read somewhere it only takes 2 generations to lose something, you know, and we haven't lost it. So how lucky. And what a great time to be alive, that we've got this knowledge. We know what plastics do. We know to stop all this stuff and to slow down. So don't be depressed about it. You know, it's like, lucky us. We have power. We can change things.
Totally.
So, just by making carrots.
Totally. Let's make more carrots. And what I love about you, Sharon, is just the positive mindset and the positive approach. And sometimes I can be a bit cynical in my own mind, but I really appreciate you shining your positivity on this conversation. And I think you've given us some amazing practical tips. And I'm going to try out these
Carrots.
carrots. Yeah, I'm going to give these carrots a go, and I'll let you know how it goes.
If they're for you, cut them in the round. Because just a little bit, when you're at your desk and you put a little dish and you want to nibble at something, popping one in your mouth, it's just less annoying for the people around you, by the way, and they're more grown up. And for the kids, I do them in planks and they just dip them into hummus and it's great.
Yum. I love that.
Talk for hours about.
We could talk for hours. We're pretty much coming.
Simple ferments. That's what it is. It's very simple. Everything.
Simple. I know you're incredibly busy, and you've got some new team members coming on board today. So I want to get you back to your regular job. But just before we finish, if there is one thing that someone could do for their gut health, what would that be, Sharon?
Oh my God, everyone asks me that. I really believe in the power of milk kefir.
Water kefir. Yeah.
Milk.
Oh, milk kefir. Oh, yes. Milk kefir.
I mean, wow. Look, I'm drinking my water kefir. I love water kefir to pieces. I have seen so many people's lives change from milk kefir. I can't even, and I don't like to be that one who says that, but that's a whole other podcast. So many people's lives change from milk kefir. If you've got your own SCOBY and you make it yourself, or you can find a way to have a co-op and buy it from someone else, it's magic.
It is magical.
Yeah.
We're on the same page there, and I'm not sure whether we've spoken about this, but I'm embarking on a clinical study on milk kefir.
Are you?
Because it is, I'm with you. It is the most miraculous food in my mind, from a scientific perspective, on the planet.
Not the stuff that isn't milk kefir.
Yes, not the supermarket stuff. The one
I
with
call that like tang to orange juice.
Yeah, that's it.
The theory is there. It looks like orange juice. It's not.
Totally. And from my research, the benefits of milk kefir actually lie in not so much the bacteria, but the functional peptides that the bacteria produce. And if you look at the studies, the functional peptides are what we call molecular mimicry. So they mimic a lot of the pharmaceutical drugs. So if you think about, having 10 to 15 of these peptides in the product, that can, for instance, be antihypertensive, so lower your blood pressure, or antimicrobial, meaning killing bacteria, or lowering blood sugars. And you've got all this in a product that takes 45 minutes to make, 24 hours to make it home. Prep time is like literally 3 seconds, add milk to it, leave it for 24 hours, and you've got this product that you can make for the rest of your life from one packet of milk kefir grains.
Yes. And you can, also people who struggle to drink the milk kefir, there are so many ways to make it delicious. I mean, for me, I've heard that there's tryptophan in it, which I think I often recommend people who are beginning, and I know they're not fond of the texture, or they don't usually drink dairy. And I always say, just before bed, a shot glass, drink it down, because we are a giant tube, right?
Yeah, literally.
What goes out, so you have to keep doing this. And this is not something you go, I had some of that last week. No, remember, we're a tube, and everything has to keep going in all the time, because it's going to go out all the time. But milk kefir, if you have it at night, at least the tube's laying flat. And it's just going to stay in there. This is just my old mother. Settle into your intestinal wall and do some work. And actually, it's tryptophan, so you're going to go to sleep and your body's relaxed. When your body's relaxed, it does a lot of great stuff, detoxing and building and fixing and healing. So that's my first thing. It'll be like, if you can make your own milk kefir. I mean, my daughter's going away on exchange to France, and that's one of the things in a jar. I'm like, you have your milk kefir, because it helps with acne, and you can put it on your face. When Roger, who's my partner now, but he joined as a chef early on, at the Fermentary, he was taking, what do you call that? Pepto, for heartburn.
Ah, yes.
Terrible stuff. A lot of people take it.
Proton pump inhibitors.
He was just taking them all the time when he got heartburn, and he also had reflux. He was burping and stuff. And I was like, whoa, if you work here, you know, you can't be taking that. And he didn't like the milk kefir. He was like, I don't like drinking my goat's cheese. Or my feta. I don't like drinking my feta. I'm like, what? Just not, you know, try it. In 3 weeks, he was drinking, he would have a 750ml bottle sitting on the bench as he was working, drink the whole thing. I kid you not, it's been 5 years and he hasn't had that medicine since. And every time he lets it go, he, you know, gets lazy, we don't have it in the house or whatever, he'll get it back and just, you know, get the milk kefir out again. And I've heard so many stories like that, even for pets and animals who are inflamed and they've got arthritis in their bones or whatever, and people feed them the milk kefir grains. I mean, sometimes I just have to slow down because I don't want to sound so evangelical about things, you know. But and then when people ask me, I'm like, no, I can't tell you because I don't want to sound like this. But it's for sure. I'm so glad to hear you're doing research on it.
Totally. It needs to happen. It needs to happen because no pharmaceutical company is going to invest in that because it's so cheap. For one packet of grains that a customer buys once in their lifetime, I mean, a $20 lifetime value, whereas you got pharmaceutical drugs that you spend thousands, hundreds of thousands potentially in a lifetime. So it just doesn't make sense for a pharmaceutical company to invest in that, or nor would they. So I thought, well, we're going to do it.
Dairy industry. I mean, they're probably struggling right now because of all the vegans and the coconut milk and things like that. Maybe the dairy industry has some spare money.
Maybe, hopefully, because diabetes is a huge issue. So that's what we're hoping to get the funding from the government to actually help us with the trial. Because obviously, you know, milk kefir is great for things like diabetes, anxiety and depression. They're very topical and huge problems our society faces. So let's do something about that.
Yeah, I mean, I've had circles of mums who, you know, get into it because I'm into it and from school. And when they get into the milk kefir, they're saying, I don't want to spread this word, but is it an appetite suppressant? And I'm like, it does that. You can have a big glass of milk kefir in the morning and literally not even remember that it's lunch and it's 2 o'clock and you're like, wait, because you feel, and you know, the other thing is you can make smoothies with it that, if you've got a green smoothie and you put milk kefir in it, it will stay green for a couple of days. Doesn't go brown if you put a banana in it because there's antioxidants in there. And I feel as though the things that taste good in milk kefir are also really good for you, like cinnamon. Cinnamon's great for your blood. It just seems to match with things that are good for you. I hope you can get that through, and if there's anything I can do.
Thanks, Sharon. No, absolutely. Let's keep talking about how we can collaborate and get this word out there, because we both know it's transformed both our lives. And both our lives are really parallel since that 2011, 2012 and the GAPS diet. There's so much similarities. Yeah. Sharon, I want to thank you so much for coming onto this podcast.
I'm going to blow your kiss.
It's such a wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed it, but don't be a stranger and let's catch up pretty soon.
Yes, please. I'd love that.
Awesome. Sharon Flynn, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.